Hello lovelies, it's Drew here and I'm going to make a video today about the Divine Circus deck. I'm going to talk about a couple of topics and I'm going to get straight into it. So I actually got given this by my ex. It was a wonderful gift because I had been looking forward to getting this deck for many reasons. I saw it a couple of months ago. And as I was starting to actually write a novel about themes of circus and sort of the freak show lifestyle, sideshows, things like that, I'm very fascinated with that side of humanity, that side of society, life, putting your life on show, things like that. And so I picked up this deck because I love the artwork. There are some artwork pieces that I'm not really fond of at all, and I really want to work harder with because I want to understand the subconscious messages that my own conscious mind is blocking. Because I think any piece of art that you have resistance to usually has a message, even if it is a small message, and you can learn from that experience of studying it and looking at the meaning behind it, especially given that this deck has many creative artists working together to collaborate to produce this deck. Okay, so I'm going to start off with the interesting aspects of this deck that I find that I'm going to be using that are very helpful in transitioning from taking this deck as it was intended to be created and probably used for, and what I feel is going to be my path with this deck. Uh, Not very often do I get the instinctual experience of knowing what I want to do with a deck this fast into the process. Mostly with tarot, yes, but Oracle decks take a little bit of time for me to actually transition and understand why they're in my life and what purpose they actually have. I'd like to say that too, that when we're looking at Oracle decks as well, especially when they're designed by multiple people and given an intention, a brand, a specific purpose, that you pick up on their energy that you may be looking for, especially with words. Words are incredibly loaded. And that is what I'm going to be talking about first today, the loaded words of this deck. In particular, I'm going to show you, and as with the cards, I'm not going to be showing you too many because of Australian laws, and that's one of the reasons why I haven't been making many videos lately, because I've been trying to figure out ways to make videos for you guys where I can still incorporate the use of cards and how I'm integrating them into my magical purposes, magical practices, and everyday life, and being able to actually give you examples of that as well. Okay, so if you haven't seen the box already, this is what the box looks like. It has its standard Blue Angel guidebook, and I believe it's being published by Llewellyn as well. I absolutely adore this company. I have many decks by them, and I will still support them to the end of the day. So my issue was, and I hadn't actually noticed this when I was purchasing it, when my partner was purchasing it, and I hadn't really noticed when I was looking online. It says guidance for a life of sacred subversion and creative confidence. I'll just show you guys, hopefully you can see. Now, when I was starting to work with this deck, instantly I knew that this was going to be a deck that had many stories in it. One of the appealing things about this deck is that its characters really spoke to me. Each one of them and the words associated with them really resonated something within me that wanted to be explored. So the word that particularly grates on my nerves and has been troubling me for the past couple of days is the word subversion or subversive. Now, my understanding of subversion is not necessarily a high energy one. I want to start out by saying that I understand why the use of the word could be integrated or used to advertise or propagate the intention of this deck, but I feel like it is the wrong word to be using for a sacred creative deck. And the word sacred attached to Subversion is very coy to me. It's very underhanded because Subversion is underhanded. Subversion to me is a Protestant statement. It is about the secret, the hidden, the manipulative, the overthrowing, war, battle. And I know that a lot of us feel in the spiritual community, the creative community, and being empathetic that walking this life, walking this path, no matter what path that we are on, can be extremely difficult in a world and society that really holds the podium for the patriarchy and doesn't always allow the space for the divine feminine creativity or the divine masculine creativity. But I think the world is changing and shaking up. Of course, not largely. We can see the news and understand that that's not a global understanding or a global conscious understanding. But we can understand, and I understand from this deck, that in our pocketed communities, we do have that sacred embodiment of the divine masculine and the divine feminine, and experiencing that and working to rebalance that. So I don't feel the need for subversion. I don't feel the need to war. And one thing I really did love about the Sacred Rebels is it used the rebellion energy. It used the creative rebellion energy to really put a message out there that being a creative person is a challenge. Being a creative person is a stand against tradition. It's a stand against culture. But it not necessarily needed to war against it. And I feel like the topic of subversion is definitely, loaded with a lot of history, a lot of political history. And I wondered whether the word subversion was really necessary in a deck that is more so speaking about a creative and spiritual stand, and whether it really was about a spiritual stand or not, or whether it was just about something, about owning something inside of ourselves and really taking the fear out of it and understanding where that fear comes from, the darkness, and the characters of these cards who are archetypes and representations of our more darker selves. And that is what I gathered, because it does have a lightness to it, it does have a darkness to it. It has a childlike aspect and also has a very deep entrenched, evolution of the hero's journey, in a sense, dulled down to understand the different archetypes and the different paths that we do take as humans and having a spiritual bodily experience. So I felt that it was off. The whole deck twisted for me to understand that word and to have that be the intention for this deck. Saying that, it gave me a perspective that I don't think I would have got had I not actually thought about the word itself and where I can find my own subversive side in my own rebellious nature to actually walk the path that I want to walk. I feel like subversion is also tangled up with chaos. It's tangled up with the inner violence that is manifest outside. When I see this deck, I don't feel violence, and I don't want to associate it with violence. I don't want to associate it with a protest. When I see this, I want to meet the characters who embody the cards. I want to walk into the scenes. I want to path walk into the scenes and understand the messages that the artists are trying to tell. Because I feel this deck is very fractured in Alana's aspect, in Alana's work, which is beautiful in itself, but often repeated throughout many decks, which I will mention time and time again, and I have friends who can definitely back me up on this experience and thought. and the artist's work. And I don't feel personally, when I look at this deck, that this deck was created for the images to be subversive, inquisitive, curious, questioning. Yes, but I don't see them as a daring statement to wage something against something else. And if anything, if you're waging something against something else, we're waging something against ourselves. Okay. So hopefully that made sense to you guys, because it has been rattling around my head how to describe it and how to bring that focus back to understand how this deck can be also very powerfully, creatively, collaboratively, and sacredly, without having to go down the roads of shock value, without having to go down the path of the, it's like the typical horror momentum, or the energy that's built from watching that. It's developing this high antagonistic energy, and then using it to fight rather than using the channeled energy to actually create. And that's where I was a little bit iffy about it with this deck, because it does feel very strange and fractured for me. So how do you bring those two perspectives together? Because how do you bring those two perspectives in yourself together? The traditional and patriarchy, and the current society that we live in, and the changes that need to be made, the evolution that needs to be made within and without ourselves personally and ourselves collectively, because nothing is detached. Every time we do something in the astral, every time we do something in the magical practices that we do, we shift something energetically within ourselves, and we shift something energetically as a whole. And that is definitely my belief. I was going to have some tea. So I thought about astral. I thought about how I could actually step beyond the intention that Alana had created, move beyond the kind of really, I would say it feels manipulative, in a sense, a manipulative marketing scheme to get people's attention, which I think it effectively worked really well. But when you're coming from a place of authenticity, and anyone please chime in, because I'm absolutely open to any of your opinions, you need to be able to create something that is universal. And I guess that is universal, but how do you create something that cannot be another action against society as well? Because something that I was thinking about too was, we have all these issues in the world, we have all these things that we're fighting against, we have all these things that we're against. Why do we need another oracle deck or tarot deck telling us to rebel? What is rebellion? It's completely subjective, and it's unique to each of us. And for me, I wanted to really step inside the astral realms and discover my own perception of these characters, my own perception of what worlds I can travel to, what portals I can open, how I can integrate these colours, the images, the expressions, and commune with these cards to bring my own understanding of the sacred divinity, the sacred fall, and the sacred path of somebody who is walking in this world to make a change. So I have a couple of areas that I thought I'd show you, and just what I'm sort of thinking about working with. Okay, so we've got these clowns. So we've got cherry on top and confetti, and to me they're very childlike. So my initial thought of working with these two, these cards, and there are a couple, I think there's about 8 or so cards that are very influenced by this artist and the style. To me, this would work really well with inner child work. I used to collect dolls as a child. I never really used to be afraid of clowns or anything like that. But I definitely used to have a thing about puppets, and one of my favorite books, and I think I still have it, was a beautifully illustrated book of Pinocchio. And the art style was very much like this, a sort of, a puppet, and with masks and gorish paint and flavorful colors and just very outlandish. And these cards definitely represent the overindulgence of the inner child to me. They also speak to me about what we're told as children, how we perceive clowns, how we perceive those masks, how we perceive those mimes. In a way, it does talk about the hidden. It also talks to me about what we're conditioned to believe and look at, and the more lighter, sort of colourful, radiant, positive, outlandish, almost creepy aspect that we know as children is hiding underneath the surface. That we know that when we're old enough, we'll figure out what it is about these particular beings, these particular archetypes that unsettled us. Because to me, I want to know what unsettles me in my inner child. And these cards provide excellent characters to do that. Two of my favorite cards in terms of really questioning the inner female and the young female, the adolescent female, and our place in society would be the Princess Victorious and the Sweetheart. I know for myself, as a child and teenager, I was completely rebellious. I think there's not a person who isn't in some capacity, but this really spoke to me about the person that I was at a young age, who knew that I was never going to be the worker or the walker in society that I had been raised to understand. I was always a darkling, always questioning, always curious, always asking too many questions. I was the loner, the loser, the artist. I have been and walked many names. And there is something really beautiful about these cards. There is something so raw and honest about these cards and unapologetic that I think these would be fantastic cards to focus on and ask the questions about the inner teenager, the daughter, the rebellious one. Because those parts of ourselves are not often honoured. They aren't. A lot of us and a lot of women go through life, even in adulthood, trapped by conditioning and trapped by tradition. We are called losers and loners and wanderers when we don't fit the societal bands of marriage, when we don't fit the societal bands of family and creating families. And this is not a stab on people who have or will or do. And this is not a stab on monogamy or non-monogamy. It's just that I've noticed within myself, and something I want to explore, is this idea of angst and this idea of just knowing yourself. Knowing yourself so incredibly well, even from a young age, and having to endure many people around you telling you that your creative spark, your unique spark, your inner knowing needs to be reconstructed to fit into another world. Likewise with the adult, Divine Feminine. I find that Bright Baby and Rare, Raw and Real are two coins of the amazing capacity that we have as women. To me, they feel like they represent the undertones, the raw and the wild feminine that are in each of us, including men. And this is a video also for men. I feel, we do have that divine feminine, and we shouldn't be segregating it to genders. When I first saw these cards, something primal turned up in my ethereal body, and I wanted to explore the warrior archetype. I wanted to explore what it meant to be a female, powerful tribe leader. I wanted to experience what it was like to walk in the steps of somebody who on the outside looks pristine and perfect, who really is absolutely divine and beautiful, and inside may have those dark corners. Because for me, when I'm looking at Bright Baby, I'm looking at somebody who is ready to fucking burst. It's such a subtle beauty. The creative energy inside just glows from her body to me. Whereas this card, this is someone who is fucking powerful in their darkness and their authenticity. Somebody who will stand up for what they want and need and the rights of others, and is not afraid to be vulnerable, and is not afraid to dance, and is not afraid to walk their fear. I think these two beautiful cards will be interesting to astral work with as well. Lastly, I think for me, one of the best things about this deck that I really, really did like is the possibility that you can go into many portals. And by portals, that can mean anything to you, but for me it means doorways, gateways, thresholds. It means guardians, it means stories, it means poetry, it means dance, and it means conversation. And that is how we make movements in this world. We look beyond Earth and into space. We look at the cosmos and everything that is united in it. This deck has a potential, if used correctly. Okay, take that back. This deck has a power, if used, to tap into the core aspects of yourself that want to shine and want to be created, to start conversations like this one. And I really thank the creator for this alone. I think starting these kinds of conversations are very important, because this is the rebel. We rebel by sharing our opinions, by asking questions, by continually asking questions of ourselves and others, and making changes in our lives. But I think it's cosmically related as well. And I think in this way, they do have a few cards that for me really related to sort of past life, space travel, intergalactic beings, star planets, systems, star seeds, energy. And I'm really excited to be working with these two. So I've got the Nebula Warrior and the Supernova. And these to me look very fantasy, and I do think they are intentionally created that way. And I like over fantasy because I am a fantasy science fiction writer. But again, there's something really beautiful about the divine feminine in these cards. I think they show different aspects that are universal and have been in our blood. I think they're pieces of us and energetically imprinted stories that we are working together through the creation of art, through the creation of conversation, to bring about in this world. And I really love that aspect that they have got some sort of ethereal space beings in there, because I think that is one of the least looked at aspects in terms of magical practices at times. The idea of, aliens and starseeds, and bringing that energy into practice. And not everybody has to, not everybody wants to. But it's more of a cosmic conversation. And those are gateways that you can explore as well. Those are gateways you can explore society. Society throughout history, but also society in other worlds. And I think that is a great portal as well, to be exploring other worlds with the deck. I don't want to use this deck as a weapon. I want to use this deck as a tool. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about the word subversion, and if you could recommend any other words that may relate to this deck, what your thoughts are about this deck, and what about what I talked about. I'm a little bit stuttery today. It's okay. And yeah, hopefully this video wasn't too long or too draining, and you actually found some inspiration from it. I'm pretty passionate about this, so I will be looking forward to sort of stepping into these different worlds, and hopefully you guys have a little bit more perspective on how you could use this deck as well. Thank you guys for watching. I will talk to you later. Bye.